Welcome back to the deep dive. Today, we are going to talk about construction. And, usually when we say that word, you probably picture scaffolding, cement mixers, maybe.
Zoning laws, that kind of thing.
Exactly. The stuff that keeps our cities from, well, from collapsing.
The physical world.
But today, we're going to argue that the concrete inside your head, your memories, your life story, your sense of self, is actually more constructed than the building you're sitting in right now.
And here's the unsettling part.
The blueprints we use to build our own reality,
Okay.
they're just full of errors.
It's a pretty bold claim, but the sources we have today really, really back it up. We're looking at a stack that, at first glance seems totally unrelated.
Right.
We've got this heavy technical guide on city strategies and social cohesion from the URB AL3 program.
Okay.
But then we're stacking that against these legal and psychological texts on eyewitness testimony, the narrative fallacy, and the fallibility of memory in judicial processes.
That sounds like a total mismatch. Urban planning and criminal law.
It does. But the mission today is to find the common thread. And that thread is design. We try to design cities to fix social chaos.
And our brains try to design stories to fix cognitive chaos.
And in both cases, when that design gets too aggressive, things, well, they break.
Exactly. Let's start with the macro view. The physical world. We're looking at this guide on city strategies. The context here is specifically Latin America and the Caribbean, right?
Yes, and the context is pretty intense. The source notes that 75% of the population in these regions is urbanized. But this isn't, neat, planned suburban growth.
Yeah.
It's rapid, often unregulated expansion. They call it informality. Basically, the city just grew way faster than the plan did.
So you have people living in cities, but the cities aren't really functioning as cities. They're just dense collections of people.
Exactly right. And you end up with deep inequality, fractured communities. So the planners aren't just trying to figure out where to put the bus stop.
No, this is bigger.
They are trying to engineer something they call social cohesion.
I see that term a lot in policy papers. It always feels a bit like a buzzword. Does this source actually define what that means?
It does, and it's surprisingly technical. They break it down into 5 specific dimensions. Think of them as the load-bearing walls of a healthy society. First, you have inclusion. Can people actually get jobs, get services? Then, legitimacy. Do people trust the institutions?
Which is a huge problem if the informal city feels completely ignored by the mayor's office. I mean, if the garbage doesn't get picked up, the government isn't legitimate to you.
Precisely. Then you have participation, recognition of diversity like cultural or religious differences, and finally, a sense of belonging. If you're missing even one of these, the structure starts to fail.
The source uses a phrase I really got stuck on, territorial pedagogy. It sounds incredibly academic.
It does, but the concept is actually pretty cool once you dig in.
What does it mean?
Territorial pedagogy. It basically means the city itself is a teacher. Urban planning isn't just a document a consultant hands over. It's a process where the city learns how to live together. You physically build the lesson into the streets.
So the layout of the city actually teaches you how to behave or how to relate to your neighbors.
Yes, exactly.
The Rosario, Argentina example in the text is a perfect illustration of this. They didn't just build houses, they built something called housing parks.
Right. The Housing Parks Project is fascinating. In many cities, especially in Latin America, you have the rich zone and you have the poor zone, and they are totally separate. Rosario deliberately mixed high, medium, and low-income housing in the same physical space. They used construction to force social interaction.
So they literally designed out the segregation. They made it so you had to interact with people from different economic backgrounds just to walk down the street.
That is territorial pedagogy. The territory teaches you that these people are my neighbors.
Or take Bilbao, Spain. Everyone knows the Guggenheim Museum. I always just thought that was about tourism. Get people to come look at the shiny building.
And that's the surface level. But the source argues the Guggenheim was a tool to shift the city's identity. Bilbao was a declining industrial hub. It was gritty.
Right.
By planting this piece of avant-garde architecture there, they weren't just building a museum. They were rewriting the city's narrative. They turned it into a meta-industrial cultural center.
So they imposed a story, we are a culture capital, onto the messy reality of industrial decline, and eventually the reality caught up to the story.
That's the key takeaway here. We impose logic zones, landmarks, parks on a messy environment to make it cohesive. We crave that structure. We want the city to tell a story that makes sense.
And this is where we pivot.
Yeah.
Because if city planners are doing this to streets, Our brains are doing this to our memories every single second.
We are moving from the architect of the city to the architect of the mind. And honestly, the architect in your head is arguably much, much sloppier.
We're talking about the narrative fallacy. This comes up in our Study Smarter source, specifically referencing the work of Nassim Taleb.
This is the human tendency to turn random events into a linear story. We hate randomness. It makes us anxious. We can't handle the idea that things just happen.
So if a company succeeds, we say,
It was the visionary CEO.
right. We ignore luck, we ignore timing, or the fact that their main competitor just imploded. We say, he had a vision.
Or if a war starts, we say it was economic pressure. We strip away all the chaos to make the information digestible.
Because they got lucky or someone made a mistake isn't a satisfying story.
It's not cohesive. Our brains are biological city planners. We pave over the potholes of randomness to make the drive smoother. We want cause and effect. A leads to B leads to C.
But reality is usually A leads to, well, nothing, and then D happens for no reason at all.
Exactly. And that desire for a clean story is what completely ruins our memory. We think memory is like a video file. I hit record when I see something and I hit play when I want to remember it.
I think most of us still operate on that assumption. I saw it with my own eyes. That's the ultimate proof, right?
But the science, specifically the work on eyewitness testimony, says that's just dead wrong. Memory is reconstructive. Every time you remember something, you are rebuilding it from scratch.
From scratch.
You're pulling up fragments and using the logic of the narrative fallacy to fill in the gaps.
So you're not playing a video, you're directing a movie based on a few blurry photos.
That is a perfect analogy.
Mm-hmm.
And the problem is, other people can mess with your script. Let's look at the misinformation effect. There is this classic Elizabeth Loftus study mentioned in the source.
The red car study.
Yes. Subjects watch a slideshow of a red car hitting a pedestrian. Half the group sees a stop sign in the slides. The other half sees a yield sign. Later, the researchers ask them questions. But for the stop sign group, they slip in a trick. They ask, did another car pass the red car while it was at the yield sign?
So they just drop the lie right into the sentence.
Subtly. And later, when asked to identify what they actually saw, a huge chunk of those people remembered seeing a yield sign.
No way.
The question literally overwrote the visual memory. The story suggested by the interviewer became the truth.
That's scary enough on its own. But the source mentions another study that I found even more disturbing because it involves other people. The Eric the Electrician study.
Oh, right.
This shows it's not just authorities who mess us up, it's our peers.
This one demonstrates social contamination.
Mm-hmm.
So you have two people watching a video of a theft, but, and this is very clever, they're wearing polarized glasses. They're looking at the same screen, but seeing slightly different details.
So I might see the thief grab a ring, but you don't.
Right. Then, the researchers let the two witnesses talk to each other. Before the chat, accuracy is high, around 79%.
Okay.
After they talk. Accuracy for the discussed items drops to 34%.
Wait, it drops. Why?
Because we want to agree. We want a shared reality. If you say, I saw him take the ring, I unconsciously edit my memory to include the ring so that we are cohesive. We value social cohesion over factual truth.
Which brings us right back to the city planning concept. We prioritize the sense of belonging over the raw data.
And in a low-stakes situation, like gossiping with a friend, that's fine. But in a courtroom, it's catastrophic. Look at the Ronald Cotton case.
Jennifer Thompson. She was the victim.
She was raped, a horrific crime. During the assault, she made a conscious effort to memorize her attacker's face. She studied him specifically so she could identify him later.
Right.
She picked Ronald Cotton out of a lineup. She was 100% certain. She testified he got life plus 50 years.
And he was innocent.
DNA exonerated him a decade later. But here's the thing. Jennifer wasn't lying. She wasn't trying to frame him. She did see his face in her memory, but she likely constructed that image during the lineup process. Maybe he looked a bit like the attacker. The police reinforced it. And over time, her brain just built a cohesive story that put an innocent man in prison.
The source says faulty eyewitness testimony is involved in 75% of DNA exoneration cases. That is a massive failure rate for the gold standard of evidence.
It forces us to ask, are we remembering or are we just storytelling?
And if you think adults are bad at this, the daycare panic of the 80s and 90s shows what happens when we force these narratives onto children. This section of the research was honestly hard to read.
It was a hysteria. You had the McMartin preschool, the We Care nursery case with Kelly Michaels. I mean, we're talking about accusations of secret tunnels under the schools, satanic rituals.
Teachers flying children to farms to watch animal torture.
It's unbelievable.
And playing the piano nude, using cutlery for abuse. I mean, these were bizarre, vivid, specific details. But there were no tunnels.
No tunnels, no physical evidence, zero.
So how do you get a classroom full of kids to testify that their teacher flew them to a farm if it never happened? Children aren't naturally malicious.
No, they aren't. You have to construct it for them. The source breaks down the interviewing techniques used back then, and it's a checklist of what not to do. It started with coercive interviewing.
Meaning what?
The adults simply refuse to accept nothing happened as an answer.
So if the kid says, I don't know, or we just played with blocks, the interviewer pushes.
They'd say things like, don't you want to help us? Or, all the other kids told us the secrets. It's weaponized peer pressure. They were telling the child that the cohesive thing to do, the way to belong, was to tell the story.
And they used props, right? The anatomical dolls.
This was the smoking gun in the Kelly Michaels case. Anatomical dolls were introduced in 24 out of 39 interviews before the child had even reported any abuse.
So they were showing them first.
The interviewers used the dolls to act out scenarios and ask, did she do this? They were teaching the children how to confabulate.
Confabulate.
It's when you create a memory to satisfy a demand or fill a gap. The kids figured out that the correct answer, the one that made the adult happy, was the story about the tunnels and the bad teacher. So they built that reality.
It's territorial pedagogy again, but in the worst possible way. The authority figures taught the children a false map of reality, and the children learned it.
And once that scaffold is up, it's incredibly hard to tear down. This ties right into the recovered memory controversy, the idea that you can repress a trauma perfectly for 30 years and then just unlock it in therapy.
The source is pretty skeptical of that, isn't it?
Very. The science generally shows that traumatic memories are usually too persistent, not hidden away in a vault. The real danger is implantation.
Implantation.
Look at the Lost in the Mall study or the hot air balloon study.
This is the one where they photoshopped childhood photos.
Yes. They took real photos of the participants as children and just photoshopped them into a hot air balloon basket. They showed the participants the fake photo and asked them to describe the trip.
But they never took a trip.
Didn't matter. 50% of the participants eventually described the trip in detail. They talked about the wind, the height, looking down at the trees.
50% created a full memory from a fake JPEG.
Because the photo provided the scaffold. The brain just filled in the concrete. The brain said, well, here are the photos, so it must have happened. Now I need to build the memory to support it.
So, if the architecture of our memory is this flimsy, if half of us can be tricked into remembering a balloon ride we never took, is there a building code? How do we fix this, especially with kids?
There is a fix. It's called the NICHD Protocol. It was developed specifically to stop the disaster of the daycare panic from ever happening again.
How does it work? Is it just be nicer?
It's about structure. It's about stripping away the interviewer's narrative completely. First, you build rapport, but then you do something called training in episodic memory.
What's that?
You ask the child to practice describing a neutral event like a birthday party. You teach them how to tell a story based on facts before you ever get to the allegation.
And the questioning style changes.
Drastically. No forced choices. You don't ask, did it happen in the morning or night? Because maybe it didn't happen. If you ask that, the child feels forced to pick one.
So what do you ask?
You use only open-ended prompts. Tell me everything that happened, and then what happened. You force them to be the architect instead of handing them the blueprints.
I see.
And studies show this doubles the amount of accurate details provided, and it minimizes false allegations. But it's hard. It requires the interviewer to sit in the silence and not try to help the story along.
It requires resisting that narrative fallacy.
Which goes against our biology. We want to connect the dots. But when you connect the dots for someone else, you change the picture.
So to bring this full circle, we started with cities. We talked about how planners use housing parks in Rosario and museums in Bilbao to impose a cohesive story on a chaotic city. And that's usually a good thing. We need cities to make sense.
We need the social cohesion. We need to feel like we belong to a larger structure.
But when we apply that same desperate need for cohesion to our own minds,
we start paving over the truth. We edit our past to fit our present. We adopt our friends' memories to fit in. We let authority figures write our scripts because it's just easier than facing the confusion.
We prioritize the good story over the messy reality.
And as we saw with Ronald Cotton and the McMartin preschool, the cost of that clean design can be human lives.
So here's the thought I want to leave you with. We know that half of you listening could be convinced you took a hot air balloon ride that never happened. You'd feel the wind in your hair. You'd remember the smell of the propane burner.
It feels real. It feels just as real as what you had for breakfast this morning.
So think about a core memory of yours. Maybe the moment you met your spouse, or a specific childhood trauma, or a moment of great success. The story you tell yourself about who you are. How much of that is the raw footage? And how much is the renovation you've done over the last 10 years to make it fit the story of you?
It's an unsettling question, but you have to ask it.
Thanks for diving deep with us.
Check your sources.
See you next time.